Hey, we're here to read chapter 16 of Things Fall Apart. When nearly 2 years later, Obieric had paid another visit to his friend in exile, the circumstances were less happy. The missionaries had come to Umuofia. They had built their church there, won a handful of converts, and were already sending evangelists to the surrounding towns and villages. That was a source of great sorrow to the leaders of the clan, but many of them believed that the strange faith in the white man's God would not last. None of his converts was a man whose word was heeded in the assembly of the people. None of them was a man of title. They were mostly the kind of people that were called ifulefu, which were worthless, empty men. The imagery of an efulefu in the language of the clan was the man who sold his machete and wore the sheath to battle. The sheath, of course, is like the covering or the holster for the sword. So it's basically somebody who is weak, who is stupid, who doesn't make good decisions. So he's definitely not respected. So the majority of the people in the Igbo tribe who were initially converting to Christianity were people that weren't respected. So it was not as concerning to the Igbo people that they were converting. Kielo, the priestess of Agbala, called the converts the excrement of the clan, which is like crap. And the new faith was a mad dog that had come to eat it up. What moved Obieric to visit Okonkwo was the sudden appearance of the latter's son, latter being the initial, so it would be Okonkwo's son, Nwoye, among the missionaries in Umuofia. "What are you doing here?" Obieric had asked, when after many difficulties the missionaries had allowed him to speak to the boy. "I'm one of them," replied Nwoye. "How is your father?" Obieric asked, not knowing what else to say. "I don't know. He's not my father," said Nwoye unhappily. And so Obieric went to Mbanta to see his friend, and he found that Okonkwo didn't wish to speak about Nwoye. It was only from Nwoye's mother that he heard scraps of the story. So things are definitely starting to come to a head between Okonkwo and his son. We know that there's been a lot of conflict between the two of them. Okonkwo is definitely not the most loving, compassionate father. And there have been things throughout the book that have kind of suggested that Nwoye is not content with the beliefs and traditions of the Igbo. So I guess it's not surprising that he is converting to Christianity here. The arrival of the missionaries had caused a considerable stir in the village of Mbanta. There were 6 of them, and one was a white man. Every man and woman came out to see the white man. Stories about these strange men had grown since one of them had been killed in Abame and his iron horse tied to the sacred silk cotton tree. And so everybody came to see the white man. It was the time of the year when everybody was at home. The harvest was over. When they had all gathered, the white man began to speak to them. He spoke through an interpreter who was an Igbo man, though his dialect was different and harsh to the ears of Mbanta. Many people laughed at his dialect and the way he used words strangely. Instead of saying myself, he always said my buttocks, which is like my butt. So here we are seeing again that the like our Western stereotype of Africans is often that they're all the same, that they all speak the same, they all think the same, they all believe the same things. But really the cultural variation and the subcultures in Africa are similar to the cultural variation that we have in America or in any country or continent. So this translator is an Igbo, but he is from a different area, and so the way that he speaks, even like he has a different dialect, a different way of speaking. He has an accent, and he's not translating 100% correctly, which we know can be hilarious. So instead of saying myself, he would always say my buttocks. But he was a man of commanding presence, and the clansmen listened to him. He was one of them, as they could see from his color and his language. So they're like, this weird guy is with the colonists and he looks like he's an Igbo and he knows our language, so it was kind of weird for them. The other 4 black men were also their brothers, although one of them didn't speak Igbo. The white man was also their brother because they were all sons of God. And he told them about this new God, the creator of all the world and all the men and women. He told them that they, the Igbo, worshipped false gods, gods of wood and stone. A deep murmur went through the crowd when he said this. He told them that the true God lived on high, and that all men, when they died, went before him for judgment. Evil men and all the heathen who in their blindness bowed to wood and stone were thrown into a fire that burned like palm oil. But the good men who worshiped the true God lived forever in his happy kingdom. We have been sent by this great God to ask you to leave your wicked ways and false gods and turn to him, so that you may be saved when you die, he said. Your buttocks understand our language, said someone lightheartedly, and the crowd laughed. What did he say? The white man asked his interpreter. But before he could answer, another man asked a question. Where is the white man's horse? He asked. The Igbo evangelists, consulted among themselves and decided the man probably meant bicycle. They told the white man, and he smiled benevolently. Tell them, he said, that I shall bring many iron horses when we have settled down among them. Some of them will even ride the iron horses themselves. This was interpreted to them, but very few of them heard. They were talking excitedly among themselves because the white man had said he was going to live among them. They hadn't thought of that. So in this chapter, it's really important because we're seeing this initial kind of cultural conflict between the two. And we're starting to see kind of this creeping sense that the missionaries will gradually be kind of taking over the Igbo culture. But meanwhile, in this just conflict between the two cultures, we're seeing issues with communication. Obviously, we're seeing how strange it is and how alien it is for each side to interact with the other one. At this point, an old man said he had a question. Which is this God of yours? He asked. The goddess of the earth? The god of the sky? Amadiora, or the thunderbolt, or what? So they're having a hard time, the Igbo are having a hard time wrapping their heads around the Christian God. And they're trying to make a connection between their gods and the God that these missionaries are talking about. The interpreter spoke to the white man, and he immediately gave his answer. All the gods that you named are not gods at all. They're gods of deceit, who tell you to kill your fellows and destroy innocent children. That part, of course, they're talking about the twins, the fact that the Igbo throw twin babies away into the evil forest. There is only one true God, and he has the earth, the sky, you and me, and all of us. If we leave our gods and follow your God, asked another man, who will protect us from the anger of our neglected gods and ancestors? Your gods are not alive, and they cannot do you any harm, replied the white man. They're pieces of wood and stone. When this was interpreted to the men of Mabanta, they broke into derisive laughter. These men must be mad, they said to themselves. How else could they say that Ani and Amadiora were harmless, and Idamili and Agwugwu too? And some of them began to go away. So imagine for a second that you have this belief, you have this faith, this religion, and you've grown up with it your whole life. We're talking about men here, so they are older than you, and they have believed in these gods their entire lives, and all of their religion and their lifestyle and everything is kind of based on the premise that these gods exist, they must be worshipped to, all of that. A lot of us are in a similar situation because a lot of us were raised in a certain religion. Most of us probably Christianity, but any religion, whether it's Buddhism or whatever. If you were raised in this religion and you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, however old these people are, can you imagine what would happen if some alien type person from some culture you've never seen before comes to you and tells you that everything you believe is wrong and that they have truth, that their God and their beliefs are true. Obviously, we can anticipate that this is going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of conflict between the two groups. Then the missionaries burst into song. It was one of those gay and rollicking tunes of evangelism which had the power of plucking at silent and dusty chords in the heart of an Igbo man. The interpreter explained each verse to the audience, some of whom now stood enthralled. It was a story of brothers who lived in darkness and in fear, ignorant of the love of God. It told of one sheep out on the hills, away from the gates of God and from the tender shepherd's care. After the singing, the interpreter spoke about the Son of God, whose name was Jesu Christi, of course, that being Jesus Christ. Okonkwo, who only stayed in the hope that it might come to chasing the men out of the village or whipping them, now said, "You told us with your own mouth there was only one God, but now you talk about his Son. He must have a wife then," the crowd agreed. So the Igbo people, and in this case Okonkwo, are trying to use logic to catch the missionaries in their beliefs and prove that they're wrong. "I did not say he had a wife," said the interpreter somewhat lamely. "Your buttocks said he had a son," said the joker. "So he must have a wife, and all of them must have buttocks." The missionary ignored him and went on to talk about the Holy Trinity. At the end of it, Okonkwo was fully convinced that the man was mad. Now, of course, mad in this case is not angry. Mad is crazy. They think that he is crazy. He shrugged his shoulders, Okonkwo shrugged his shoulders and went away to tap his afternoon palm wine. But there was a young lad who had been captivated. His name was Nwoye, Okonkwo's first son. It was not the mad logic of the Trinity that captured him. He did not understand it. It was the poetry of the new religion, something felt in the morrow. The hymn about brothers who sat in darkness and in fear seemed to answer a vague and persistent question that haunted his young soul. The question of the twins crying in the bush, and the question of Ikamafuna who was killed. He felt a relief within him as the hymn poured into his parched soul. The words of the hymn were like the drops of frozen rain melting on the dry palate of the panting earth. Nwoye's callow mind was greatly puzzled. I highlighted this last passage. Let's see if I can show it to you here. I highlighted this last paragraph in this chapter because I think it is so important. I think it's interesting how much of a positive connotation is in this paragraph. A lot of the diction is really beautiful, and we're seeing again this connection between Nwoye and water or rain versus his dad and dryness and death and sand. And the connection now is not just between Nwoye and water, but now the author has connected it to Christianity as well, because the author is describing these Christian hymns or songs in a way that's like metaphorically water. I'm going to read it to you again, that last part. I want you to pay attention to how beautiful it sounds. I want you to think about the imagery and think about what it might mean in relation to the characters Okonkwo and Nwoye and what's going to happen. So it says, there was a young lad, Nwoye, who had been captivated. His name was Nwoye, Okonkwo's first son. It was not the mad, crazy logic of the Trinity that captivated him. He didn't understand it. It was the poetry of the new religion. Something felt in the marrow, which is the bones. The hymn, the song about brothers who sat in darkness, that's kind of like Nwoye and Ikamafuna sitting in the figurative darkness of Okonkwo, the oppressive darkness of Okonkwo. So the hymn about brothers who sat in darkness and in fear seemed to answer a vague and persistent question that haunted his young soul. The question of the twins crying in the bush. Remember, Earlier in the book, Nwoye heard babies crying in the evil forest who had been left there to die, twins, and it bothered him. And the question of Ikamafuna, who was killed, he felt a relief within as the hymn poured, of course that is a water connotation, poured into his parched, which means really, really thirsty soul. The words of the hymn were like drops, water, a frozen rain, so refreshing, melting on the dry palate of the panting earth. So juxtaposing water with like dry, scorched, desert-like earth. Nwoye's callow mind was greatly puzzled. So he describes this experience as not being about logic. It's not that the new religion made sense to Nwoye, it's that it felt right. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 16. We will return shortly to read chapter 17.